Hello, everybody. Welcome to e-DIRAP's online hangout for open government. Today we're being hosted by me, Khairil Yusuf, and also my colleague Christine Apicul, who will be in the background and taking questions. For those of you watching live, we will have an open 15-minute session to take questions and answers posted online, either on the Google Plus page for this event and also the YouTube live channel. So feel free to post your questions, and at the end of the session, we will be taking your questions and asking our panelists. Today we have about 7 panelists from around Asia Pacific, from Australia to Japan, to India, and also Indonesia. Okay, I'll begin this by introducing for our viewers what open government is. In a nutshell, open government is basically the idea that all documents and information generated by government is easily accessible to all, to allow the public to better participate in government decision-making processes. The concept of open government is not new, but with the advent of ICT, social media, and digital documents, the publication of information pressure now is on governments to actually be more open with their digital documents and processes, to be online and also to interact with citizens. Today we have several panelists and practitioners from around the region who will be sharing with us our experiences. So as a start, I'd like them to introduce themselves. We'll start from the left. We have Danny Butt, a research fellow in the participatory public space from the University of Melbourne. So Danny, if you'd like to introduce yourself and a little bit about what your project is doing in the open government space.
Hi everyone, Danny here calling from Australia. Good to see you all. The project I'm working on for the University of Melbourne is looking at transformations in the public sphere which are occurring with the availability of new network technologies. So this includes both privatized infrastructure, availability of government data, and changes in forms of citizenship.
Thank you. Sheeta?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Sita Laksmi. I'm currently the Program Manager for Southeast Asia Technology and Transparency Initiative. And this initiative has a very high relations with open government because we are focusing 6 countries, and the two priority countries are Indonesia and the Philippines. And we are working in those countries because those countries are the founders of the open government. And Indonesia will be the chair of the open government in October.
Thank you. And Sunil?
Hi, I'm Sunil from the Center for Internet and Society in Bangalore. We do policy research in about 5 areas. Accessibility by the disabled, access to knowledge, openness, internet governance, and telecom. Over the last 2.5 years, I have helped the Iraqi government with their open standards policy, and now with their public data policy and also their open data portal. So I have a little bit of experience around open government data, both in the Indian context and in the Iraqi context.
Thank you. We also have Tomoaki from Japan.
Hello. Hello, I'm in Tokyo. I work as a researcher at a university-affiliated research institute called GLOCOM. And I also, as a volunteer, have been involved in Creative Commons Japan team, and recently co-founded with a bunch of my friends Open Knowledge Foundation initiative in Japan. I'm also sitting on a government board implementing Japan's open data strategy. So open data is particularly something I follow in practice as an advocate and as a scholar too. But I do have some knowledge on open government at large as well. Thanks.
Thanks. And finally, we have Venkatesh from Knowledge Commons India.
Hi. So Knowledge Commons deliberately been named as a counterpoint to intellectual property. We are very interested in policy issues around open source, open standards, open government, and we have made a number of policy interventions in these areas. And I've also been interested in this in a previous role as the head of public policy at Google and Red Hat. So that's my quick introduction.
Thanks. We also have two more panelists in the background. they're having difficulties joining the panel, but we will be taking their feedback. They are Mariati Abdullah from Publish What You Pay, a steering committee member of the Open Government Partnership in Indonesia, and also Elvin Marcelo from the Asia eHealth Information Network. So they will be also sharing their comments through chat, which I will share through this panel. For now, we're going to go through a couple of questions for which our panelists can share their insights. One of the first ones is to actually highlight projects that you might be involved in. So if possible, please just for our panelists to share examples of open government projects in the Asia Pacific that you're working on, and what has been their impacts in terms of, for example, better governance. Okay, if not, I'll share mine first. As an example, I'm actually working for a senior project, which is an open government initiative in Malaysia. And what we've learned with open government is that for countries with poor democracies like Malaysia, even basic information about government is often not easily accessible. They are still available, but they are not accessible to the public. And the government itself is not familiar with interacting with the general public, especially when it's in an online format and where it's not limited to just specific panels. So what we found out is that unlike other places where you have advanced statistics and open data, open government, for example, in Malaysia can be just as simple as just having information about our representatives online, who they are and their contact numbers, or even basic government information such as what bills are being passed in Parliament. So for countries like Malaysia, open government means starting from scratch in terms of getting the government to start interacting with citizens, and it can be as simple as just having wikis of information on representatives and political bills that are being debated. Anybody else would like to highlight their open government project?
I don't think I have evidence to demonstrate that the open government data initiative that I've been part of has had some developmental impact because we are at the very beginning of implementing both the open standards and open government data policies in the Iraqi context. But I just wanted to share some of the obvious challenges. One of them you already touched upon, which is if a lot of data is offline, has not been born digital, then how do we ensure that this becomes part of the open data definition? Because if you look at the OKFN definition, it's mostly digital access to government data that is the emphasis. The second challenge that I faced was it's very difficult to agree or to get the Iraqi government to adopt, and in many cases these standards don't exist at all, for specific domains, specific ministries, specific types of e-government systems. They don't seem to be very evolved e-government data standards. So it looks like most countries are doing this on their own. There are some internal standards, of course, but I think, at least in the global south, people would greatly benefit if some amount of attention was paid to developing standards, for example, for human resource management or financial management, etc. That could be adopted by many governments that are taking two steps simultaneously. They are A, introducing e-governance systems, and two, also adopting or being part of the open government data movement worldwide. So that was quite a challenge for me, and it has greatly retarded the work that we could have done perhaps in the Iraqi context.
Yep. Would anybody like to highlight some of their projects? Okay.
Can I say something about Indonesia?
Okay. Sure. Which one had their hands up first? We'll have to.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we'll have Yanuar first from Indonesia.
Okay. Thank you, Khairul. Well, Indonesia is one of the OGP initiator, together with 7 other countries. And I think another one aspect that we highlight here is not only from the, if I may say, supply side, which is government providing access, government providing information and data, but also how to empower citizens, actually. How to empower citizens, how to empower people to access the data, to access the information, to access, to promote openness itself, not only from the government side, but also empowering the citizens. In Indonesia, we have a number of projects still started from the government. We, for example, started the so-called One Service, which is basically one portal which citizens can access about information about public services. Another initiative is the so-called One Map, which aim to have a single map which can be used not only by the government. For example, if we talk about forestry, if we talk about plantation, if we talk about farming, it is very important in managing our natural resources. But the problem is that because of the lack of coordination, lack of communication among government agencies itself, sometimes we do not have the integrated data. So this One Map initiative is aimed to address this challenge. The third initiative is the so-called citizens reporting. We use the Indonesian word lapor, meaning reporting. So citizens can complain basically using the open platform. You can use SMS, can use Twitter, can use website if they have complained about public services. And then these initiatives are aimed not only to provide or to promote openness from the government side, but also to encourage citizens to take part actively in accessing the information, but also to voice their concern. Because I think one aspect of open government is not only to make government open, but also to encourage citizens to take part. I think we have Sita and we have Muniati here already. Sita, I think, can talk more about the citizens' side. I can talk more about the government side, but I think it's better for Sita to talk about the citizen side, about what happens in Indonesia. I think that's from me.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have Tamawaki next.
Yes, so I think I shared some of the same story in a sense that measuring the impact is actually very difficult, even the project that I've been involved in, partly because it's still ongoing. The major effort in Japan now poured into is, I think, the creation or launch of National Open Data Portal. If it happens, it's big, and it will happen, I'm sure. Probably this summer, or at the latest earlier in the fall. But then, how much impact it will make, I'm already worrying how we can measure that. And I've talked to various experts in Europe and the United States, both private and government sectors, and they are still wondering how to properly measure the impact. There are some economic studies, but their methodologies are not that sophisticated, or the baseline data they use for estimation is not that reliable. So that's a challenge that I see, possibly worldwide. And then if you think about democracy side or transparency side, that's even more difficult, because you cannot easily convert the value of transparency into the currency or economic value. So, but then going back to the project itself, I think Japanese government will release a relatively large number of data sets under a portal with a proper license, and that's going to be the first big splash. I'm looking forward to it. I'm helping the people on the ground to working on that. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. So we have Shita. Would you like to share the citizens' view from Indonesia?
Yeah. So to add what Januar said, the recent research made by WW Foundations on the demand side, is from the civil society, the demand side is low. So there is not yet systemic questions or demand from the civil society and citizens on how to use on the open government. That's one thing. The other issues that we have is also the cooperation between the civil society and government in the core team of the implementation of open government is not really strong enough. So there are several donors here in Indonesia that support the capacity building for the civil society that is sharing that is sit as the steering committee in the open government initiative to have more voices. So the Ford Foundation, I think, is helping them to do that. While on my side, in HIVO side, it's mostly about we are trying to engage as much as citizens and civil society organizations in Indonesia and the Philippines to ask the government their transparency and accountability. So we are helping the demand side, while we are also still cooperations with the government. But my initiative is still very young. I think we just started in April, so we don't have a concrete project yet. And if you ask about the impact, we don't have it yet. And what I can share on my knowledge on Indonesia on the impact itself, I do think that transparency is not yet that a discussion on the larger scale. I think it needs like another 5 years or more than that to make it as open as we discussed the budget. The budget transparency in Indonesia is quite good because we are one of the most open in budgeting process in Southeast Asia. But it takes a decade to have that. So I think if you would like to have an open government and transparency in place, though Indonesia is the leader, I do think that we need time to get the impact, as you asked.
Yeah. So yeah, and just to add on that, on our side here in Malaysia, we had one more problem, which is that if the public demand is high and we don't have a good enough civil society base, there's not enough institutions that are able to handle to analyze the data independently. So when the public has high demand, but you don't have the civil society organizations that are able to analyze the data to question the policies, we have a missing component here in Malaysia in terms of dealing with the demand when the data is open. We also, Alvin here has said, put me in the queue. So we've got Alvin next from the Philippines to share his experiences.
Hi, Ariel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alvin Marcelo. I'm officially right now with the Asia eHealth Information Network, but I think Carol invited me here because of my experience as well in open source and open standard. So if I may share my screen, Carol, can you help me with that?
Okay. Can you do your screen share? Okay, we got you.
I have some slides here. So let me go through a short list of open government, and I put them in quotes because I don't think we've reached that point where our government is really open in the Philippines. The first thing, we just had our President Aquino give the State of the Nation address last Monday, and he mentioned the of Information Bill as a priority bill for Congress this year. And a lot of people are a little cynical about this because it's been a bill in Congress for like the past 3 years, and it's not getting through. So we'll have to see whether this year is the year for the Freedom of Information Bill. In terms of action, the Office of the President, and I met some people working on this right now with the Office of the President, is that they're having an open data project with support from the World Bank, and I heard that they're using CCAN, and the URL will be data.gov.ph. They started work last year as early as March, and I think they got the funding last October 2012. So this is wait and see, but there's a project on open government. The third, of which I'm a part of, is the Philippine Government Interoperability Framework, which was just convened last week. And number 2 and number 3 are actually related to each other, because without number 3, then the open data project of the Office of the President will be having a difficult time getting data from the different agencies. So I think, and the people from number 2 are actually part of number 3. See, I realize that partnership between the data.gov.ph and the PGIF would be very important. And number 4 is personally, as my role as the CIO of PhilHealth. PhilHealth is the National Health Insurance Program of the Philippines. I'm the former CIO, not there anymore, but when I was there, we together with the CEO, we attempted to open up our data, and we were sitting on lots of data at the National Health Insurance Agency. But we found out that political will is not enough, even if the leaders are willing to open up the data without clear policy framework and without good change management, such as removing the fear of openness of the employees, because they were afraid that if we opened up the data, then the inefficiencies would be very evident, and that was the point actually. So it's not just political will. I think there is a need for countries who are working on open data and open government to work with each other, because no one's really a master in open government, and the only way I think to move forward is if we come together and help each other out and share experiences. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alvin. Does anybody here have any more insights? Okay,
I just wanted to. Sunil, do you want to go first?
No, you go ahead. I finished.
Okay, so I think in India there is. We were successful in getting the Indian government to say that they will use royalty-free open standards for all e-government data, and that was a pretty significant fight where we were up against Microsoft and others. and despite a lot of opposition, we were able to win that. And the government has also shortlisted a range of open standards, including ODF. And recently there was a portal which was started, data.gov.in. The number of data sets on that portal have been going up quite dramatically. In January, when I checked, there were about 89 data sets on that portal. But when I checked it this week, that number has gone up to 3,086 data sets. These include, poverty and census data, etc., and a whole range of data. About 45 government departments are involved in that. About 6 apps have been created. And the Planning Commission recently held a hackathon, and about 1,900 people participated in that hackathon. So I think in terms of impact, the number of data sets has definitely gone up. I do not have data right now on how people are using the data, but maybe Sunil can throw some light on that. So that's a quick summary from my side.
Thanks. Sunil, did you want to add something to that? He just put you on the spot.
There are some experiments. An organization based in Delhi called Hangout, and what they are able to do is take open data and also complement it perhaps using RTI or right to information or freedom of information requests, and then send customized agricultural advisories and also below poverty line advisories to hundreds of thousands of farmers and other families living below the poverty line. So the moment the government releases data, either through open government data portals or through transparency law, then the private sector can definitely step up and provide value-added services around those data sets that sustain both the enterprise and also make sense for people across the pyramid, mostly for people at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, thanks for that. Danny, do you have something to say, or I'm just going to go through the challenges? Yeah.
I've been listening with great interest because I think most of the co-panelists here have a lot more on the ground kind of experience of open government initiatives. I can talk just a little bit about the work I've been doing, which is looking at the City of Melbourne, who've been doing some very interesting work on trying to encourage their local government infrastructure to engage citizens more fully using both online and offline platforms. And that's starting with kind of wiki experiments with wiki-based policy development into right through to sort of smart city initiatives and digital strategies. And there's just a couple of themes that I thought might be useful to kind of share rather than specific initiatives, and which has come out of my conversations with about 10 policymakers over the last few months. So the first one is that's already been mentioned by many people, is that openness is not the same as participation, and encouraging effective participation is quite a challenge. So if we think about the analogy to a public park, it's not just a piece of land which is unencumbered and unfenced. It's also surrounded by an infrastructure, roading, public transport, and it needs to be maintained. There might be signage, there are play areas, there's design kind of inputs there. So public spaces need to be sort of programmed somehow to support participation. And I think that's one of the lessons that came out of also the work that's gone on internet governance, over the last kind of 10 or 15 years is that formal openness is not the same as substantive openness, and so there are strategies for outreach that governments here are trying to work with. Not just a case of if we open it up, then that's enough. It's actually how to get substantive participation from a diverse group of citizens, not all of whom are online or who have great competencies in data management. So, and the second theme, I guess, as well, which we haven't talked about so much, which is that many of the telecommunications platforms that would make data available are privately owned and privatized. And so there's a question here about what the public interest is, and a challenge for governments to, I guess, try and work with engaging their citizens over an infrastructure which is privately owned, and if we think about sort of platforms like Facebook or Twitter or Google, as we kind of are using now, these place certain constraints on how citizens can be engaged, and they're obviously private initiatives which are interested in making money, firstly and foremostly. It's not to say they can't be used for the public interest, but there are substantial questions there, particularly when a lot of the relationships between the private sector and governments and public-private partnerships to deliver new infrastructure on the private sector side, they're subject to commercial secrecy, at least in many parts of Australia and the US. So, so I think there's a sort of interesting sort of tension there between the kind of commercial demands for secrecy and the kind of commercial interest, and then that's happening at the same time as these kind of demands to make public data open. So that's that's an ongoing discussion which doesn't have any clear solutions, but I think it does. From the people I've talked to, people are saying that we need to, maybe be a bit more agnostic about the value of open data and open government within that kind of framework. It's not necessarily, always going to be a great thing to make certain kind of data available. There are some potential downsides, and we need to think those through, even as we're exploring new and experimental initiatives.
Okay, thanks, Danny. We've got some interesting discussion in the chat at the moment, which is because we've covered certain things. Quite often in open government, open data comes up, and those two terms are quite often mixed together. So quite often when people say I'm working in open government, they automatically assume, are you doing work on open data? But as has been touched on, that there's also a strong civil society component, and Danny's also said there's also a private sector component as well in this, and that beyond data, there's also some other issues on the demand side that also needs to be sorted out in terms of the citizens and public participation. So Alvin raised an interesting point where he said that, well, what's the checklist then for a country who wants to implement open government? How open are you? What's a basic checklist? And Yoanwa shared that the Open Government Partnership eligibility points are actually a good point forward, and it has several points in it, which will result in the issues that we're going to see, for which I'm going to go through, which is basically they have requirements for fiscal transparency, such as budgets, access to information, such as Freedom of Information Acts, disclosures related to senior public officials, and also citizen engagement in terms of how much is the government engaging the citizen and not just putting, for example, just the data out in the open. So all these 4 points are actually really interesting in the sense that just opening data itself doesn't make make a country an open government, doesn't make it an open government initiative. So we're going to go next time. It's like the challenges that we face. We've touched on those. The challenges that are faced. We have problems with private sector. I'd just like to touch, for example, why people often ask countries in Southeast Asia like Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand with high levels of digital broadband penetration and online users aren't part of the Open Government Partnership, despite having most of the government departments and data online. And the reason this happens is, if you look at the points of our Open Government Partnership, the government also needs to be, you also need to have several things in place. So you'll need things like freedom of the press. Without the freedom of the press, nobody is going to work with the data. You need full accountability and transparency, especially with regards to government, where budgets, for example, are all out in the open. You'll also need to have assets of key public officials open. That's also important, because here in Malaysia we face challenges in which the government officials do not want to disclose their assets and or interactions with the companies that they deal with. So we have a major problem in actually opening up government data related to budgets and procurement. So we don't have the political will for that, and we don't have a free press. So if you have open data, nobody's actually going to report it in an objective manner because they're worried about persecution or the press's control. And finally, we don't have civil society, as I mentioned, because, well, civil society is persecuted due to restrictive laws. And this happens in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. So Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore does not apply to the Open Government Partnership eligibility criteria because we fail on all 4 points. So that's the challenges that we face here in Malaysia. What are other challenges do you see? I mean, we've already hinted on some that you would like to highlight. One example that maybe Alvin can share is, for example, people are often concerned about privacy and security and privacy implications when you start opening data. Do you have any? Does anybody have insights on issues such as that? Yes, Alvin.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. So that's exactly the problem that we had, because we had at PhilHealth, because we were sitting on health insurance data with diagnosis and procedures for people. And I think the employees of PhilHealth were right that we didn't have the capacity and the competency to make sure that when we use the data, that they would not be reverse engineered and used to identify people. Let's say a kid, a 3-year-old kid would be ordinary, but a 3-year-old kid that has cancer and tuberculosis would probably be more identifiable than others. And even if you remove the names and stuff like that, if we didn't have the right algorithm and the right protocols for de-identification and anonymization, then it would be devastating because we were holding on to health data. It would have been different if it was not health data, because even if it's personal, you don't really lose much of your privacy, like maybe your educational attainment or things like that. But when people start to understand that you might have tuberculosis, then they might, relate that you might have an HIV and things like that. So I think privacy is a major point for discussion for open data, especially for health data. And I think for many countries, especially in developing countries, we need help, and we need to help each other come up with policies and protocols and algorithms as to how we can protect the health privacy of our citizens. Over.
Okay. I'm now going to switch over to Sunil, who does a lot of work in this area, especially privacy. Sunil?
Yeah, just building on what Alvin just said, privacy is definitely one of the biggest concerns that faces the open data and open government movement today. To begin with, some open data activists don't even understand that privacy is an exception to open data, that when open data policy is crafted, personal information should be left out of it. So that is the first level of challenge. The second is there is often a kind of Western notion of what constitutes privacy. So they worry about privacy impact or infringement only at the level of the individual. But say in a country like India, if the open data set just told us HIV/AIDS, and again to build on what Alvin just said, the HIV/AIDS prevalence data just at the village level, that could result in a lot of stigma and discrimination. So the privacy problem not only exists at the level of individuals, it also exists at the level of communities, families, villages, etc. The third challenge when it comes to privacy is underestimating re-identification research, and what Alvin touched upon, I'd just like to underscore again, which is today we deal with the privacy challenge by using techniques like anonymization, obfuscation, but the trouble is re-identification research is getting more and more sophisticated, and the more data sets that you have access to and are able to overlay upon one another, the more likely it is you will be able to re-identify anonymous or obfuscated data. So that is also something that the open data movement should take rather seriously. Finally, there is the question of the public interest, and sometimes with our techno-deterministic euphoria, we seem to conflate two terms, big data and open government data. That means that we are only interested in the big data sets that often exist at the bottom of the pyramid. So in some sense, we are contributing to the growing surveillance culture. We are saying that the problems that our nation faces or our society faces exists at the bottom, and we put the poor under more and more surveillance. But I think some of the most important data sets are small data sets, and like you just said, Khairul, the wealth or assets of politicians and public officials, that isn't really big data, that's a small data set, and that exists at the top of the pyramid. And what we should be encouraging everybody to do is look up and engage in the opposite of surveillance, which is surveillance. So this is also a sensibility that the open data movement has not fully got or adopted or inherited from the previous movement, which is the transparency movement. So in India, we regularly hear of RTI activists being killed, or freedom of information activists being assaulted, intimidated. But the open data people are usually safe because they don't seem to take any of these complicated problems. They wait for the government to throw a data set at them, and then they begin to look at whatever data set the government has given them. That might be a distraction strategy. That might take away from what is really important for civil society or for a democracy.
Yep, I can concur here with Sunil, with the quiet responses of open data activists who often assume that there's a lot of data out there and that is actually useful in terms of actually open government initiatives. So very good points. We have Yanwar would also like to has some input on this as well. Yanwar?
Yep. Thank you, Khairul. I think I would just pick up from where Sunil and Alvin left. There are two types of data, I think, which we should be able to distinguish from one another. One is the so-called data which is at the domain of public. This is what open government data should focus on. The most important thing is the development data. So socioeconomic data, census data. I agree with Alvin, but it is not only about health, many other things. For example, if you have national ID, and then that national ID is made open, then all kinds of discrimination can happen. I agree with Sunil 100% about that. But then we also need to know, and what we need for government to open their data is, for example, how they perform economically, how they can get the data, how they get the data, how the data looks like, which in many countries, perhaps Indonesia included, is still confined within the so-called National Statistics Bureau, for example, and which is quite difficult to be accessed. This kind of data, socioeconomic data, development data, these are data that has to be made open. Second, I agree that those are working in the public domain, in the public space, in the public offices, their data which relates to their wealth, things like that. I think that needs to be open, because one of the eligibility criteria is disclosures related to the elected or senior public officials. I think with this, I think we will have a quite good sense of what open government data is about. I would like to again highlight what Sita said earlier about the initial report from the Web Foundation about the open government data readiness, or open data readiness. There are two sides. One is the supply side. If the data are made open, then we deal with the demand side. Who will use the data? Alvin has highlighted some issues related to the private sector. But I think it's not only about private sector, but also because we think, because I think civil society can also benefit from the data. But frankly speaking, if the data is made open now, for example, I'm not sure in this case Indonesia, for example, whether civil society is quite ready yet to use the data, to capitalize the data, to use the data for gathering or for promoting citizen participation, for example. Of course, any data would be helpful, but then we need to be quite careful when we talk about open government data. And I would like to emphasize that the data in the public domain, this is the data that we need to make open, because at the moment most of them are still not yet open. I think that's just my 2 cents on this. I see Mariati is joining. Maybe she can give some perspective, and also Sita from the civil society perspective. Thanks.
Mariati, who's just joined us. We're talking about challenges here in terms of open data, issues such as privacy and transparency. Do you have any input?
To give a response from the Mr. Yanuar said that he said that sometimes the civil society or NGO not ready yet to use the data, but for citizen, I think for the open the data and also to give freely access to the citizens is not morally waiting for the readiness of the demand side, because it is about the human right. It is about the right of access of information. So for example, my experience in the community center of Serang, in the one province in Banten, they said that if the government waiting for the readiness of demand sides or the citizens, the data would never be open, because it is not about the readiness, but this is about the right, the freedom of information right. So that's for example, when the government opened the data, it would be stimulate the public debate and also the using or utilization of data for the public. For example, in the extractive industry, when Indonesia joined the e-ITI, through the e-ITI, when the company and also the government publish their data on revenue, it was drive the demand side using that data. What kind of what context, what data is with their needs, or also their daily activity. For example, from the people in mining area, from the EITA report, they can know that there is a big number of revenue from oil and gas industry for this district. So that there are any revenue sharing from central to local government. So that they can use that information to endorse the accountability of local government, how they use that revenue to the development, to the poverty alleviations, and also to give to increasing the health and education services, for example. So that's, I think the problem is not who will open the firstly, but this is about the like I said in the before that, it is about the right of information for citizens.
Okay, thanks for that input. Yeah, and okay, I'm gonna move on to our next topic, which is, this one should be quite short. Is if anybody can share existing tools. Okay, sorry, Shita has some more to add from Mariati. Yep, Shita.
I would like to also add on Mariati's point about there is no need to wait for the readiness for both the demand side. I think the main challenges is also because the main challenges in Indonesia, our current government is having their key performance indicators. So they will more focus on that issue rather than on the bigger discussions. So and it makes them very much difficult to coordinate with one another, because I think open government requires like what Yanuar mentioned earlier about the one map, coordination among the government officials. I think it's needed. The coordination among government official and or minister is very important. That's my point to Mariati.
Thank you. Just now going to move to a quick point because we're almost running out of time. This one's a lot easier. This is more technology related. Is if the panelists can share existing tools that our viewers can use, that you have used from your experiences, that can get people up and running with open government initiatives quickly. For example, I'll give one simple example that we use for public participation, which is Fix My Street for local councils. This is an open source tool done in the UK, very simple. It simply tracks, it allows the public to quickly do quick reports on a map of all issues on local council, and it's open source. Another tool, which I think some of you might be familiar, would be the CCAN publishing framework. So if anybody here can share tools that are available, Tomoaki? Yeah.
So open spending is another, which is used globally and in Japan, spreading rather widely at the municipal level these days, which is a tool to visualize spending or budget data so that citizens can understand how their taxes are allocated to different categories of spending. That's a useful tool for transparency.
Just to be clear, this is open spending, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yeah. So Tamaki just shared open spending, which is a standard that helps people quickly analyze government expenditure with a nice website that actually helps you visualize all of this as well. Yeah. Any others examples that our viewers can have from your experiences? Because okay, I think those are two pretty good. If you want to get an open data portal up and running really quickly, CCAN has a really good open source platform already that you can quickly get up and running. Tamaki shared open spending. There's also a couple of initiatives. For me, I'd like to highlight My Society. In the UK, they have several open source tools to help with open government especially citizen participation, and other organizations that also have a lot of projects that are available as open source that countries can adopt in the Asia Pacific, include the projects funded by the Sunlight Foundation, Code for America. While it's American specific, there's a lot of tools there that you can reuse for your individual countries. And Elvin also shared a useful tool to de-identify people or to scrub data called the de-identifier at www.physionet.org. Okay. Finally, to wrap it up, we only have one question from our viewers. But before we wrap it up, just very briefly, if you had to put it in a few sentences from each of our panelists, what do you see as the challenges going forward? Key challenges that you think is going forward in terms of open government and sustaining it?
Yeah. So I think the greatest challenge is make sure you elect officials who are open.
Yeah.
Because if they have something to hide, then nothing's gonna happen. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Danny?
I think one of the key challenges, definitely support what Sunil has said about looking at the top as well as the bottom in terms of data. But that also raises the political question, which is that the demands of engagement at a practical level may conflict with the political goals of representatives in terms of election cycles and things like that. So, at least in my research, there's a lot of talk from governments about that perhaps these kinds of initiatives need to sit in a kind of a third space or something, perhaps in between the government sector and the private sector, simply to insulate them from those kinds of political political forces.
I'm more from a technical viewpoint, is that for a lot of people who are interested in implementing technical solutions to check the other issues that are non-technical raised by the open government partnership eligibility criteria, and also opening parliament declaration, which lists several important points that countries need to be able to do to enable citizen participation. Next, Mariatti.
Before I talk about the challenges, I want to highlight the one example for the tools that Indonesia, like the SAPA, Strategic Alliance for Poverty Alleviation. They provide the open data in the open format in terms of poverty rates and also the program itself. And also they're using the map to put the location of project and also the kind of program. That is the one example of tools that I want to share. And secondly, about the challenges, I think about the key challenges is also how we open the data based on the needs and also the contextualize to the purposive audience and also the beneficiaries. And we need to provide the platform for the feedback from the citizens to the governments, from the demand side to the supply side, so that the feedback and interactive reaction between both of them would be improving the open data itself. So I think that is the challenge because sometimes the government and citizens are talking in the different steps and also the different strengths of the open point.
Shita?
I think my point would be the literacy of the open government and the relevance for the citizen itself, because the open government does not translate in the welfare, for example, and it makes I think for Indonesia case, because we are not really used to have the data as our basic assumption to make decisions. I think that's also important to build the the literacy on open government or open data or any transparency discourse among the citizens. Yeah.
Sunil?
Completely agree with the point that Sita just made, that openness is only the means. At the ends are many. We need governments that are accountable. We need governments that protect the public interest. We need governments that protect the weakest members of society. And that's not automatically guaranteed through open government. So we shouldn't fetishize the means and forget the ends. Just repeating what Sita just said.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. Tamawaki?
Put some of the remarks made by other people together. At the top, we need political leadership with strong inclination and will. And then on the ground, I think we need close coordination between civic sector and the government, so that government does understand what's needed, what's required, and they can kind of sense what kind of impact they can make by opening themselves up to the society or to their own operation. And then in the long term, I think it's key to the key is how much the government can transform itself in terms of its own operation, in terms of how much data they can produce in a reusable format, how much data they can use from other agencies and make their operations better. And that would eventually improve the cost benefit of the open data or open government.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Yanwar?
Well, this is the most difficult part of as someone speaking at the last. Well, every good thing has been mentioned by all of you. I just would like to add one thing. In the core and the heart of open government partnership is about partnership, and it is not easy to build partnership among government, civil society, and business. So I think this remains challenges. I agree with all of you. We need to have a strong government with political commitment, promoting openness. We need to have active participatory citizens, and who are willing to demand openness. But we also need private sector as a partner, because we cannot do this only by the government and civil society. Although open government in partnership is started by civil society and government, but in the end, I think the challenge remains in how to build mutually beneficial partnership among these three actors. I think that's my my reflection. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've got a great list there from all the panels on all the issues that we face. Okay. We're going to close the panel discussion right now, and I'm going to go to questions from our viewers. We have one. This is quite a specific question. It's from Peter Timmons. He's specifically asking if we've discussed the Right to Information Advocacy Report published by Access Info Europe, for if any of the panelists has read this, for your comments. Yes, Tamaki.
Okay, I have read it just when the question arrived, so just took a look. But their SWOT analysis start with saying that as a strength, we have rather diverse, strong civic society. I think I'm somewhat skeptical about this diagnosis, and maybe some others on the panel agree with me. And in Japan, I see internet-related and digital-related policies are often constant shortage of civic society attention and human resources.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's about this. We don't have any other questions, and we've actually gone over time. I'm actually now going to wrap this up. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking their time to be with us on this Hangout. This Hangout will be saved as a YouTube video for those that couldn't make it for the live panel. So thank you everybody for joining this Hangout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ariel.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks.